going to kick off right into it. And we're going to talk about how COVID took down the season and how the Pac-12 decided to move the football season back to spring. But really, is it realistic for ASU and the rest of the Pac-12 to play in the spring?
Wills, I don't really know if it's super realistic. They're listening to the medical doctors and they're trying to just listen to the people who know most about this topic, but there's so much unknowns. I mean, the Big Ten commissioner, Kevin Warren, along with Pac-12 commissioners, they say they're just listening to the medical doctors, and I mean, it's just tough.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it just as a season alone, I think it's realistic to play in that spring season. But, I mean, you got to look at it as, like we talked about, the big picture. I mean, is it realistic for these kids to play in the spring, turn around, have that off season right then and there, and then go out and play another full schedule in the fall? I mean, you got to look at the ways of the NFL draft. I mean, the players want to play that. They're going to they're hurting on their body. It could affect their draft stock. But you also got to look at it in the positive ways. I mean, look at someone like Joe Burrow, who, probably would have been a 5th-round pick going into last year. If he could get a full season like that, you could really skyrocket your draft stock. So, I mean, I think it's realistic, but there's still so many question marks that remain. We saw the schedules that were potentially out. We could do probably an all Pac-12 schedule in the spring, but then it begs the question of, is it a legit championship? We talked about there's Big Ten and Pac-12, but what if the college football playoff this year? I mean, is Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma, Clemson, and Georgia? Is anyone gonna question that's not a legitimate championship? It begs the question, because will they then play in the spring if they do crown a rightful champion? I don't know. It's something that begs to be asked.
The thing is, these players they're gonna think about this. They're gonna go into the spring season. They're gonna play a couple of games. Their draft stock's high. They have an option to redshirt and basically put this whole season, in the background, because they have the draft coming up, and then they could do it all over again. I mean, there's so much unknown right now. It's just ridiculous.
But when you look at it that way, redshirting for a whole season when you can go pro and make millions instantly, it kind of begs the whole college basketball argument of, do you stay next year, try to gain your draft, make it go up your draft stock, or do you want to go early and make those millions? You're risking injury playing another, waiting a whole another year. And, there's certain players on ASU that are, chomping at the bits for that chance. We have the Frank Darby, who's been sitting in the shadows of Brandon Ayuk and N'Keal Harry. And then we have a hungry Jaden Daniels who's trying to make his draft stock go up, because in 2 years there's a few quarterbacks that could be in the first round taken. He's very likely could be one of them. There's a lot of things regarding ASU. They're a young team. We just had one of our best recruiting classes ever. There was a very promising season and, a very hopeful one, but it's just so hard to expect these kids. As a fan, we all want to see football, but it's just not realistic. I mean, I think to expect these kids to play two seasons in a calendar year is just ridiculous. And what do you think the expectations for these kids should be?
I mean, I'm not sure, but I know one good thing that has come out of this season. Let's face it, the NCAA college sports, they've known over the past couple of years, things have been brought into light. They've been known to be a money hungry, always after the money aspect, not looking after their players, thinking about their safety. I think, at least with the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, a couple of other smaller conferences, they're doing the right thing in that light. Pursuing the season would have supported the fact that they are always after that money, which is, think about how many media deals they have with these broadcast companies, everything about it. But as you were saying with Jaden, I don't know about Jaden being a Heisman.
We'll get to that later. But
a little early.
With the spring football season, I mean, it's just there's so many question marks. I can't even tell you. I'm sure it's happened before, but I know they were talking about the last time a Rose Bowl has ever been played not at UCLA at the Rose Bowl was played actually at Duke. And you look back in the history books and it's like, wow, there's a Rose Bowl played at Duke, and I think it was a similar situation to this where the Rose Bowl wasn't going to happen at the same time, and they did it elsewhere. But I mean, it's so interesting that if they do play these Pac-12 only schedules, would they still have a Rose Bowl in the spring? I mean, there's so many question marks, and with safety, we've seen the Pac-12 and the Unity group with their questions and all of that. Before we can even have a season this fall, I think there's still so many more question marks. I mean, we see the SEC, they're full steam ahead with Ed Orgeron being the head of that, and it's just you can't really say decisively that our players are staying safe. Colleges all around the country opened back up last week and this week, and will be continuing to open back up. And these are kids, these young kids, the Chad Johnson Juniors, the Bunkley Sheltons. These are guys that are 18 years old, and they're checking into one of the biggest party schools in the country and one of the biggest, just population-wise, the biggest population-wise country in the country. And you can't blame these kids for trying to be social, everyone. Like, you really can't. They're college kids. They need to make friends. They're not going to sit in their dorm room and only be friends with their football friends. And that's nationwide. That does not just involve ASU. And that's something that just as a coach, as an organization, I think the Pac-12, the Big Ten did it right by delaying the season. But I question how much they did this to kind of satisfy the fans. Here's not your full meal, but here's a little appetizer of what could be. And do they really? My question is, do they really think that the spring is going to be more successful? That we're going to have a cure for this by then, and everything's going to be all. I mean, maybe we could have it contained, and the numbers will be down. But if the same reasons you postponed the season this year or to the spring, I really don't think that those issues are going to be solved 100% by the spring. And if you truly believe that this is about those players' safety, I mean, how can you send them out there in the spring again?
I mean, I think it's a facade right now. I mean, the higher ups of these organizations are, just pushing delay. They need more time to figure out the situation. I feel like Pac-12 might have called it a little bit early, but you know what? Someone's got to take that step. Someone's got to plant their foot in the ground and be like, look, this is the right thing to do. We don't know enough about the coronavirus and what it's going to be like in 6 months, but I know there is hope.